The day Adaeze signed the divorce papers, she was wearing the same white dress she had worn on her wedding day. Not because she wanted to make a scene, not because she wanted him to feel guilty. She wore it because it was the only dress she owned that still fit. 3 years of surviving on 1 meal a day while sending every spare naira to her sick mother in Enugu had made her smaller, thinner, quieter. She had become a woman who had learned to take up as little space as possible, so the man she loved would never be reminded of how much she needed him. Chukwuemeka did not even look at her when she slid the papers across the table. He was already on his phone, texting, and Adaeze, who had loved this man since she was 19 years old, who had cooked and cleaned and prayed and waited and sacrificed and smiled through humiliation after humiliation, finally understood something she had been refusing to understand for 3 years. He was never coming back. She picked up the pen. She signed her name in the same elegant cursive her late father had taught her. She stood up. She smoothed her white dress. And then she walked out of that conference room without looking back. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that someone had been watching her from across the street. Someone who had been watching her for a very long time. His name was Kang Seo-jin, and if you moved in certain circles in Lagos, in Seoul, in Dubai, in Zurich, you already knew that name. You knew it the way you knew the name of a storm before it arrived, with fear, with respect, with the understanding that some forces in this world do not negotiate. At 38 years old, Kang Seo-jin was the silent hand behind 3 of the largest import-export empires in West Africa. He owned buildings that did not appear on public records. He had conversations that were never recorded. He made decisions that moved entire markets long before anyone understood why they had shifted. The word Mafia was too small for what he was, but it was the word people used in whispers when they thought no one was listening. He sat in the back of his black Maybach, watching the woman in the white dress walk down the street like someone who had just survived something terrible and was still deciding whether she was grateful to be alive. His assistant, a sharp-faced young Korean man named Park Jun, spoke without turning from the front seat. "Sir, we have confirmed the divorce was finalized 20 minutes ago. Adaeze Okonkwo is now legally a free woman. Her ex-husband, Chukwuemeka Obi, has already moved his mistress, a Miss Temi Adeyinka, into the family home in Lekki Phase 1. He transferred all joint assets into his personal account 4 days ago, before Adaeze was informed of the divorce proceedings." Seo-jin said nothing. His eyes followed Adaeze as she hailed a yellow Danfo bus because she could no longer afford a taxi, and climbed in without hesitation. "She doesn't know," Seo-jin said quietly. "Sir? She doesn't know what her husband found in that house, what he's been protecting." He finally looked away from the window. His eyes were dark and absolutely still. What he used her to hide. Park Jun swallowed. "Should we proceed with the next phase?" Seo-jin straightened his cufflinks. Italian, custom-made, the color of midnight. "Give her 72 hours, he said. "Sir? Why 72 hours?" "Because a woman who just signed divorce papers deserves at least 72 hours to breathe before her life changes again." He paused. "And because I need 72 hours to confirm that everything I believe is true." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "If it is, then everything changes. For everyone." The Maybach merged silently into traffic, and the clock began. Hour 1. Adaeze arrived at her cousin Ngozi's flat in Surulere carrying 1 bag. 1. Everything else. The furniture she had chosen, the curtains she had sewn by hand, the small herb garden she had grown on the balcony. All of it was now Temi's. All of it belonged to the woman her husband had chosen over her. Ngozi opened the door, took one look at Adaeze, and pulled her inside without saying a word. She sat her down. She made tea. She sat across from her and waited. Adaeze stared at the cup for a long time. "He didn't look at me," she finally said. "When I signed the papers, he didn't even look at me once." Ngozi's hands tightened around her own cup. 3 years, Ngozi. I gave that man 3 years of my life. I gave him my body, my money, my prayers, my... She stopped, pressed her lips together, shook her head. "He didn't look at me. Adaeze, I'm not crying." She said it quickly, fiercely. "I promised myself I would not cry for him again. I cried enough. I'm done." She lifted her chin, and Ngozi recognized that look. She had seen it once before, 12 years ago at the funeral of Adaeze's father. The look of a woman who had decided that the only way forward was straight through the fire. "What are you going to do?" Ngozi asked carefully. Adaeze wrapped both hands around the warm cup. "First," she said quietly, "I'm going to sleep, because I haven't slept in 4 days." She paused. "And then I am going to figure out how to rebuild my life from absolutely nothing." She almost smiled. Almost. "I've done it before." What she did not say, what she could not say because she did not yet know, was that her life was not about to be rebuilt from nothing. It was about to be shaken to its foundations by a truth so enormous, so devastating, that it would rewrite everything she thought she knew about the last 3 years of her life. Everything. Hour 6. Across the city, in a glass and steel penthouse that sat 42 floors above the streets of Victoria Island, Chukwuemeka Obi poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey and felt, for the first time in 3 years, strangely free. Temi was somewhere in the bedroom, laughing at something on her phone. She had already begun redecorating in her head. He could tell by the way she kept pointing at walls and making measurements with her hands. Letter. He didn't care about walls. He didn't care about furniture. He cared about the document he had just received confirmation of, the one that meant the last loose end had finally been tied. His phone rang, a number he recognized but did not enjoy seeing. He answered. "It's done," he said without greeting. "She signed. It's legal. She has no claim on anything." The voice on the other end was low, careful. "And the item? The thing she's been carrying without knowing it?" Chukwuemeka's smile was thin and cold, still with her. "She has no idea. She'll never know." A pause. "Good," the voice said. "Keep it that way. If she ever finds out what's embedded in that bracelet—" "She won't," Chukwuemeka said sharply. "She never takes it off. She thinks I gave it to her as a wedding gift because I loved her." He laughed once, a short, ugly sound. "She's sentimental. She'll wear it until the day she dies." He ended the call. He sipped his whiskey. He did not notice, he could not have noticed, that the conversation had been recorded by a listening device that had been in his penthouse for the past 48 hours. Planted there, precisely and silently by a man named Park Jun, on instructions from Kang Seo-jin. Hour 14. Seo-jin sat in his private operations room, a space that looked, to anyone who didn't know, like a very well-equipped home office, and read the transcript of Chukwuemeka's phone call twice. Then he set it down and was very still for a long moment. "The bracelet," he said. Park Jun nodded. "Gold bangle. Traditional design. She has worn it consistently in every surveillance photograph for the past 3 years. Our technical team believes it contains a micro-storage device. Given the conversation, we believe it contains encrypted data." "What kind of data?" "That," Park Jun said carefully, "is the question. Based on our intelligence on the network Chukwuemeka is connected to, we believe it could be financial records, routing information, names." Seo-jin stood up slowly and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Lagos glittered below him, indifferent and beautiful and dangerous, the way it always was. "If it's what I think it is," he said almost to himself, "then that bracelet contains enough information to bring down one of the most dangerous money laundering networks operating between Nigeria and Southeast Asia." He turned. and Adaeze Okonkwo has been walking around with it on her wrist for 3 years without knowing. Yes, sir. Seo Jin's expression was unreadable. He married her, he said quietly. He married her to use her as a carrier, someone that no one would suspect, someone too innocent, too trusting, too... He stopped. Sir, how long have they been using her? Potentially from the beginning of the marriage, possibly longer. Seo Jin's hands were flat and very still on the windowsill. Anyone who knew him well would have recognized that stillness. It was not calm. It was the opposite of calm. It was the absolute, focused, terrifying quiet of a man who had decided something. Find out who she is, he said. Everything. From the beginning. We already have a file, not a surveillance file. He turned from the window. His eyes were the darkest thing in the room. I mean who she is, what she wanted before that man got his hands on her, what she dreamed of, what made her laugh. He paused. What she's lost. Park Jun blinked. In 7 years of working for Kong Seo Jin, he had never heard him ask for that kind of file. He said nothing. He simply nodded, and he began to understand that this situation had just become something very different from what it had started as. Hour 22. Adaeze woke up disoriented, and for 3 beautiful, terrible seconds, she forgot. She forgot the divorce. She forgot the signing. She forgot Temmie, and the home that was no longer hers, and the 3 years of pretending not to notice the receipts from restaurants she had never been to, and the perfume that wasn't hers on collars she had washed by hand. Then she remembered, and the weight came back. The full, heavy, settling weight of her new reality. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of Ngozi's spare room. Then she got up. She washed her face. She plaited her hair back from her face the way her mother had taught her. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the sink. Adaeze, she said to her reflection, the same way her father used to say her name, like it meant something. You are still here. You are still standing. She looked down at the gold bangle on her wrist. She almost unclasped it. She almost hurled it across the room, but she stopped. It was the only beautiful thing she still owned. And despite everything, despite knowing now what she had refused to know for so long, some small wounded part of her was not yet ready to let it go. She turned away from the mirror. She did not know that the bangle on her wrist was not a wedding gift. She did not know it was a weapon. She did not know that 72 hours from now, a man she had never met would place it gently in her hand and tell her the truth that would destroy everything she thought she understood about her own life. She just went to help Ngozi make breakfast. Hour 31. The file Park Jun compiled on Adaeze Okonkwo was 47 pages long. Seo Jin read every word. He read about her father, a secondary school mathematics teacher in Enugu who had died of a preventable illness because they could not afford the hospital bills. He read about how Adaeze, at 22, had taken 3 jobs simultaneously to keep her mother in the small family house and her younger brother in school. He read about the fashion design certificate she had earned by studying at night after her shifts, the small tailoring business she had started from a single sewing machine, the clients she had slowly, carefully built. He read about Chukwuemeka, the smooth-talking Lagos businessman who had appeared in her life when her business was just beginning to grow, who had charmed her mother, who had proposed after 8 months before Adaeze had fully understood the speed at which she was moving, who had, gently and systematically over 3 years, dismantled every independent thing about her, convinced her to close the tailoring business, managed the household finances himself, isolated her, slowly from the friends and clients who had known her before him. Seo Jin sat back. He recognized the pattern. He had seen it in other contexts, in other operations. It was a very specific kind of targeting, patient, calculated, the kind that required someone to be selected in advance. She had been chosen, he realized. She was not loved. She was chosen because she was trustworthy looking, because she had no powerful family connections to ask questions, because she was the kind of woman who, once she loved you, would carry anything you gave her without ever looking too closely at it. Seo Jin closed the file. He felt something he was not accustomed to feeling, something that moved through his chest like a slow current. He named it carefully, the way he named all things, with precision and without sentiment. Outrage. Clean, cold, absolute outrage. And underneath it, buried beneath years of discipline and strategy and a life spent operating in the dark, something quieter, something he had not felt in a very long time and had no useful vocabulary for. He picked up his phone. "Change the timeline," he said when Park Jun answered. "Sir, I'm not waiting 72 hours. He stood up. "Set up the meeting, tomorrow morning." "Shall I prepare the usual approach? The business context?" No. He was already moving, already thinking, already 3 steps ahead. No business context, no cover story. He paused at the door of the operations room. "Tell her the truth." Silence on the line. "Sir," Park Jun said carefully, "the truth might frighten her." "Good," Seo Jin said. "She should be frightened. What she's been carrying should frighten her. What her husband did to her should frighten her." His voice was very quiet. "But she won't be frightened of me." He said it not as a boast. He said it the way a person states a fact they have already verified. "How do you know that, sir?" Seo Jin thought about the woman in the white dress, walking down the street after signing her divorce papers, head up, back straight, climbing onto a Danfo bus like she had done it 1,000 times, because she has already faced the worst thing that could happen to her, he said, and she is still standing. Hour 48. The message arrived through Ngozi's door as a handwritten note, delivered by a man in a dark suit who said nothing and left immediately. Ngozi read it and called for Adaeze with a strange urgency in her voice. Adaeze came from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, and read, "Mrs. Adaeze Okonkwo. My name is Kang Seo Jin. I have information regarding the circumstances of your marriage and divorce that you urgently need to hear. I will not contact you again. This is the only invitation. If you choose to come, a car will be waiting at the bottom of your street tomorrow morning at 9. You will be returned safely within 2 hours. What I have to tell you will change everything. I am sorry for what was done to you." KSJ Adaeze read it twice. Then she put it down on the table very carefully. "Who is Kang Seo Jin?" she asked. Ngozi was already on her phone, searching. She went very still. "Adaeze," she said slowly. "This man is..." She looked up. "He's not a small person. He's not..." "Adaeze, people don't just get notes from this kind of man." "What kind of man?" Ngozi set her phone down and met her cousin's eyes. "The kind," she said carefully, "that when he says he has information, he has information." Adaeze looked at the note again. "I am sorry for what was done to you." Something about those words, something about the way they were written. Not "I am sorry for your situation," not "I am sorry for your troubles," done to you, as if he knew, as if he had already decided it was not her fault, as if he had looked at the facts of her life and reached a verdict. She picked up the note. "I'm going," she said. "Adaeze." "I'm going, Ngozi." She folded the note. "My husband threw me out of my own home for a woman he'd been hiding for years. I signed divorce papers in the dress I got married in. I arrived here with one bag." She looked up and her eyes were steady and completely unafraid. "What exactly do I have left to lose?" Ngozi had no answer for that. Neither of them slept much that night. Hour 63, 9 o'clock. The car was there. A black Maybach, silent and enormous, sitting at the bottom of the street like a polite threat. Adaeze was wearing a simple blue dress she had borrowed from Ngozi. She had her hair pinned up. She wore the gold bangle. She carried nothing but her phone and her dignity. The driver opened the door without speaking. She got in. The drive was 20 minutes. The car glided through Lagos as though obstacles simply did not exist. She noticed that. She filed it away. They arrived at a building in Victoria Island that had no visible signage. The lobby was marble and very quiet. She was taken, not to a boardroom, but to a sitting room. Warm colors, flowers, 2 chairs, afternoon light coming through a tall window. She sat. She waited 3 minutes. Then the door opened, and Kang Seo-jin walked in. She had not known what to expect. She had not been able to build a picture of him from Ngozi's phone search beyond the basic facts. Korean, wealthy, private, powerful. She'd been prepared for old or cold or frightening. She was not prepared for this. He was tall. Not aggressively so, but tall enough that he filled a doorway. He was wearing a dark suit with no tie, collar open, and he moved with the particular stillness of a man who had trained himself to take up exactly as much space as he intended, and not 1 inch more. His face was angular, serious, not young exactly, but not what she expected. And his eyes, when they found her the way the eyes of someone find you when they have been looking for you for a long time. He sat down across from her. He did not reach out to shake her hand. He said nothing for a moment, as if he was giving her time to adjust to his presence. She appreciated that without knowing why. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was low, accented, precise. "Your note suggested I should," she said calmly. "So, what information do you have?" He almost smiled. She could tell by the slight shift in his expression, not quite reaching a smile, but recognizing that she had surprised him. "I'll begin at the beginning," he said, "because you deserve to understand all of it, not just the part that affects you immediately. All right? 3 years ago, a money laundering network operating between Nigeria and Southeast Asia needed to move encrypted financial data out of Lagos without using any digital channels that could be monitored. He watched her carefully as he spoke. They chose a physical method, a storage device, very small, very sophisticated, embedded in a piece of jewelry. He paused. Adaeze did not move. The jewelry was given to a woman who had no idea what it contained, a woman chosen specifically because she was above suspicion, trustworthy, visibly, demonstrably, a woman who traveled occasionally between cities, a woman whose movements no one would question. He paused again. A woman who loved the man who gave it to her and would never think to question a wedding gift. The sitting room was very quiet. Adaeze looked down at the gold bangle on her wrist. When she looked up, her face was very still. "Then show me," she said. He took a small device from his jacket pocket. He held it toward the bangle, and a small indicator light blinked green. "The device is still active," he said. "It has been transmitting data at irregular intervals for 3 years, keyed to the network's own encryption system." He put the device down. "Adaeze, your husband did not marry you because he loved you." She closed her eyes. One slow breath. Then she opened them. "How long have you known this?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, admirably, heartbreakingly controlled. "We confirmed it 4 days ago, but we have been investigating the network for over a year. And you waited until after the divorce to tell me." "We did not know the divorce was coming. When we saw it happening, we were still confirming." "He filed without telling me," she said. "I had 4 days' notice. He planned it to move fast before I could." She stopped, a realization moving across her face like a shadow. "He wanted me out of the house. He wanted me out with the bracelet." Seo-jin said nothing. He let her think. "Once I was gone," she said slowly. "Once I had no legal connection to him or his assets. Whatever information is on this device, he could retrieve it without any link back to him. I would just be the strange divorced woman who'd been walking around with stolen data on her wrist without knowing it." Her voice had gone very quiet. "He was protecting himself." "Yes. He used me as a carrier for 3 years. He used our marriage. He used... She pressed her lips together. He used everything. Seo-jin leaned forward slightly, just slightly. "What I am going to ask you now is not small," he said, "and you are allowed to say no." She looked at him. "The data on that bracelet contains the names of every member of this network, the financial routing, the accounts, the bribes, the officials. If that information reaches the right hands, legitimate, international, credible hands, it collapses an operation that has been hiding behind legitimate business for 8 years. It sends people to prison, real people, important people who believe they are untouchable." He held her gaze. "But to extract it, I need you to cooperate. And once you do, you will be connected to this investigation. Your name will be part of this." He paused. "Which means you will also be protected by every resource I have. That is not a small thing." Adaeze was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Lagos continued its relentless, beautiful noise. "You said in your note," she said finally, "I am sorry for what was done to you." "Yes." "Did you mean that?" He did not hesitate. Every word. She looked at him for a long, searching moment. This was a woman who had learned, through 3 years of loving the wrong person, how to read the difference between a man who was telling you what you wanted to hear and a man who was simply telling you the truth. What she found in Kang Seo-jin's eyes was something she had not expected. She found grief, not for himself, grief on her behalf. The kind of grief that comes from understanding fully what someone has lost. She unclasped the bangle. She held it out. "Take it," she said. What happened in the next 12 hours moved fast. The extraction team worked through the night. The data on the bangle was exactly what they had believed. 643 names, 17 countries, 41 financial institutions, 11 Nigerian government officials, 7 senior Korean business figures, a web so large and so carefully constructed that even Seo-jin, who had been hunting it for a year, was briefly, quietly stunned by the scale of it. He called contacts, he made arrangements, he was methodical and precise and completely calm in the way of a man who has been preparing for this moment for a long time. But between calls, between arrangements, he found himself doing something unusual. He kept checking the room where Adaeze was waiting. She had declined to leave. She had said, very simply, "I want to know how it ends." And she had been given a room, and food she barely touched, and she sat with her hands in her lap and her back straight, and she waited. Around 2 in the morning, Seo-jin came himself. He sat across from her, the same 2 chairs, the same quiet room, and he poured tea for both of them without asking. She looked at the cup and then at him. "Tell me something," she said. "What do you want to know?" "Why did you tell me?" She tilted her head slightly. "You could have taken the bracelet a different way. You could have had someone bump into me on the street. You could have had someone pick my pocket. You didn't need me to know any of this. You chose to tell me." She paused. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because you had a right to know," he said. "That's not the only reason." He looked at her, and for the first time that night something shifted in his expression. Something that was not the contained, controlled face of a man conducting an operation. "No," he said, "it is not the only reason." "Then what is the other reason?" "Because," he said carefully, "I have spent a long time operating in the dark, moving through a world where people use each other as instruments, where trust is a liability and honesty is a strategy, not a value." He looked down at his tea. "And when I read your file, when I understood what had been done to you, I made a decision." He looked up. "I decided that whatever else happened with this operation, whatever else I needed to do, you would not be another person who was used and not told the truth." She held his gaze. "Even though telling me the truth complicated your operation." "Significantly," he said. even though it would have been faster and cleaner to do it without me. Yes. She was quiet. You're a strange man, Kang Seojin, she said softly. I have been told. In what context? And there, for the first time, he actually smiled. It was a brief thing, barely there, but it changed his face entirely, and Adaeze felt something shift in her chest in a way that she was not ready for and was not going to examine right now, in the middle of everything. She looked away first. Hour 72. Dawn came over Lagos the way it always did, abruptly and completely, like a decision that had already been made. Seo Jin was on a call when Park Jun knocked and entered. It's done, Park Jun said. The package has been delivered to the International Task Force. We have confirmation from 3 separate sources that arrests are being initiated. He paused. Chukwuemeka Obi is on the list. Seo Jin ended his call. When? This morning, within the hour. Seo Jin stood at the window, watching the light change over the water. And the other names, the officials? Also confirmed. Good. He turned. Make sure Adaeze's name is protected. She appears only as a cooperative witness, no details that could identify her publicly. I want that ironclad. Already done, sir. Seo Jin nodded. He went to the room where Adaeze was. She was standing at the window, watching the same Dawn he had just been watching from a different window on a different floor. She had her arms folded against herself, not in defensiveness, but in the way of someone standing against cold wind, except there was no cold wind, just the weight of everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. He stood in the doorway. It's over, he said. She did not turn immediately. She stayed at the window for another moment. He's being arrested, she said. It was not a question. Yes. Temi doesn't know. She was not part of the operation. She is not being charged. She just thought she was getting a rich husband. Adaze's voice was very quiet. She had no idea she was moving into a house that was about to collapse. She paused. I almost feel sorry for her. Seo Jin said nothing. He had learned in the past hours that Adaeze Okonkwo said things that required no response from him, that she thought out loud and arrived at her own conclusions with a thoroughness that he found unexpectedly extraordinary. She turned from the window. She was exhausted. It was visible. In the shadows under her eyes, in the way she held herself like someone who had been very still for a very long time and was starting to feel the effort. But her eyes were clear, completely clear. What happens to me now? She said. That depends on what you want. She blinked. I'm sorry? You have options, he said. Your legal status as a cooperative witness gives you certain protections. My organization will ensure your immediate financial needs are met. That is non-negotiable, and it is not charity. You were used by this network. Compensation is appropriate. Beyond that, he paused. I was told you had a tailoring business before your marriage, that it was growing. She stared at him. You read my file, she said slowly. Yes. You read about you know about my sewing machine? I know about the 3 jobs at 22. I know about the fashion certificate. I know about the business your husband told you to close because he said it was not generating enough income. He held her gaze, which was a lie, incidentally. Your client records showed consistent growth. She was very still. Why do you know all of that? Because I needed to understand who you were, he said simply. And because... He stopped. Because? Something crossed his face. The briefest vulnerability, gone almost before it arrived. Because I wanted to know, he said. The room was very quiet. Outside, Lagos was waking up. The sounds of the morning beginning, motorbikes and voices, and the city finding its rhythm. Inside this room, something else was finding its rhythm, careful and tentative, and neither of them quite prepared to name it. My mother's house is about to be repossessed, Adaeze said. Did your file tell you that? Yes. Can you stop it? Yes. She looked at him for a long, searching moment. Why would you do that? Because I can, he said, and because she did not deserve to be implicated in what her son-in-law was. Just like that. Just like that. She shook her head slowly, not in refusal, in something more like disbelief, the quiet, careful disbelief of someone who has been so long in a desert that they cannot quite trust the water. Kang Seo-jin, she said. Yes. I don't know what to do with you. His expression shifted again, that almost smile, the one that changed everything. That, he said quietly, is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time. 3 weeks later, the news broke internationally. 14 arrests in Nigeria, 7 in South Korea, 3 in Singapore. The financial network operating behind a web of legitimate businesses dismantled so thoroughly that investigators said it was as if someone had pulled a single thread and watched the entire structure unravel. Chukwuemeka Obi's photograph appeared on the front page of every major Nigerian newspaper on a Tuesday morning. Adaeze saw it from behind the counter of a small studio space in Surulere, rented, clean, hers, where a second-hand industrial sewing machine hummed beside a table covered in fabric samples. She looked at his photograph for a long time. She felt something. Not the scorching thing she had expected. Not rage, though she had a right to it. Not grief, though she had felt enough of that. She felt something quieter, like watching a chapter close, like standing at the last page of a book you've read so many times you know every word by heart, and finally putting it down. She turned back to her work. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she had saved under a name she had typed with a complicated mixture of emotions she had not yet sorted through. I heard you signed your first client this week. Congratulations. She stared at the message. She typed back, How do you know that? The reply was immediate. I know many things. She could feel him smiling from 40 floors above her. She typed, That is an extremely unsettling answer. I know that too. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. She typed, Why are you texting me, Seo-jin? A pause, longer than his previous replies. The kind of pause that meant something was being composed and reconsidered. Then, because I would like to have dinner with you, if you are willing. No operations, no files, no agendas. Just dinner. She set her phone down on the table. She looked at the fabric in her hands. Pale yellow silk. For the first client she had booked entirely on her own, through a referral, through reputation, through the work her hands could do when no one was telling her to close the business and stop dreaming. She picked the phone back up. She typed, I'm busy for the next 3 evenings. The reply, 4 evenings from now then. She typed, You're very persistent. You already knew that about me. She typed, finally, 7 o'clock, and you're paying. His reply came so fast it was almost immediate. Obviously. She laughed. A real laugh. Sudden and involuntary. The kind that surprised her. The kind she had not heard from herself in a very long time. Ngozi looked up from across the room with wide eyes, and Adaeze shook her head, still smiling, and said nothing. What was there to say? That the worst year of her life had ended in something she did not have a name for yet? That a woman who had arrived at her cousin's door with one bag and a broken heart had, in 72 hours, been cracked open and rebuilt? That somewhere in the space between devastation and dawn, between a divorce she had not asked for and a truth she had not been prepared for, between the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming, somewhere in all of that, something had begun that felt quietly and terrifyingly like hope. She picked up her needle. She went back to work, and she thought. With the same clarity and steadiness she had found in herself that morning, she stood at Ngozi's sink and said her own name like it still meant something. That she was ready. Not for him. Not for any man, not yet, not fully. For herself. For the version of Adaeze Okonkwo that had been there all along, underneath everything that had been layered on top of her. The one with the sewing machine and the 3 jobs and the fashion certificate and the herb garden she had grown from nothing. She was ready to become that woman again, fully this time, without apology. And if a certain Korean man with dark, quiet eyes and an almost smile and an extremely unsettling knowledge of her life happened to be part of what came next, well, she had faced worse surprises. She had survived all of them. 4 evenings later, at precisely 7 o'clock, a black Maybach arrived in front of a small studio in Surulere. Adaeze locked the door behind her. She was wearing something she had made herself, deep green, perfectly fitted, the kind of dress that announces that the woman inside it knows exactly who she is. She walked to the car. The door opened. He was already looking at her when she got in, and whatever he saw made him stop whatever he had been about to say and just look, for one unguarded moment, with an expression she had no word for in any language she knew. "You made that," he said. "I did. It's extraordinary." She settled into the seat. She looked at him directly, the way she had looked at him from the first, without flinching, without performance, without pretense. "I know," she said simply. And Kang Seo-jin, the man who had faced down governments and dismantled empires and moved through the world for decades without anyone ever surprising him, laughed. A real laugh, low and unguarded and entirely unplanned. And Adaeze thought, there it is. So that's the real one. The car moved smoothly into the Lagos evening, carrying 2 people who had both, in different ways, spent too long in the dark, and were only now, cautiously and imperfectly, and with full knowledge of the cost, beginning, carefully, to step into the light. The bangle was recovered as evidence. Chukwuemeka Obi was sentenced to 11 years. Adaeze's mother's house was saved. The studio in Surulere expanded 3 times in 18 months. And as for what happened over dinner, and after dinner, and in all the evenings that followed, that is a story for another time. But it was, without question, worth the wait.